A video call. Jaime Gahche.
Of companies on the market. So she wants to kind of use this as an education point for patients.
Rebecca Allen.
Okay, yes, the CGMP inspections, that chart does show that last year we inspected about 500 companies that year, and those are the numbers, and the dietary supplement industry is quite large. We are limited by resource constraints.
Todd Cooperman.
I'd like to mention Consumer Lab actually has, through the Freedom of Information Act, requested the results that Dr. Allen's talking about, and you can actually get that information by company and see which companies passed or failed in a given year. We actually have that free on our site. During COVID, when the inspection stopped for a while, we stopped asking for it. So kind of several years prior to COVID is where we have that information on our site for free.
Thank you.
Patricia Haggerty.
Okay, so next question. I hope I can interpret this correctly. The dietary ingredient does not match the certificate of analysis name. How then can this be a verification of the COA? Is there a standard format of the COA that would include a CAS number for the dietary ingredient? Perhaps the questioner is asking about a dietary supplement, the name of a dietary supplement, when it doesn't match the COA name. And that also came in during Dr. Allen's talk.
Okay, we tend to look for the common usual name when we compare the name of an ingredient to the name of the ingredients on the C of A. Typically we use common usual name in the case of Botanicals Herbal Commerce publication. And we do not typically look at CAS numbers, usually either common and usual or genus and species, if applicable.
Thank you. This question is also for you, Dr. Allen, but I think others could chime in. So has there been a movement pushing for FDA to change their limitations on dietary supplements to allow for claims to treat conditions and diseases, or certain ones?
Right now, we work within the regulatory framework. Right now, dietary supplements are not considered drugs and cannot treat, mitigate disease. And yes, we do have the health claim benefits that someone discussed earlier, but we do work within the regulatory framework.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else want to comment on that? Okay.
Yeah, so the next question is, consumers often misinterpret the FDA's very cautious language regarding supplements, which frequently is at odds with lay understanding of the issues. Do the inquiries you receive provide a data source regarding these types of misunderstandings?
Who does that address to?
I think anyone who would like to chime in on that, please do. I think it may have come in during Dr. Allen's talk, but anyone can comment.
Steve Mister.
Well, I think there is some confusion in the consumer marketplace. I assume that you got the regulatory overview in one of the earlier presentations this week. Any supplement that makes a structure function claim on its label is required to carry that disclaimer that says the FDA has not evaluated this claim. That's in the statute. I think a lot of consumers misunderstand that and don't, and that leads them to think that the product is not regulated at all by FDA. And of course, that's not what the disclaimer says. It says that the claim has not been evaluated by FDA. And when we look at consumers, we find that their understanding of regulation is all over the map. There are some consumers who think that These products are regulated just like drugs are. There are a lot of consumers who think that there is no regulation of these products. And we often see in the consumer press the reinforcement of that misinformation, where the press will say dietary supplements are not regulated, full stop. So I think, yeah, FDA, I think, has a lot that it could do in this area. As an industry, we're trying to, help consumers understand where they are regulated and how they are not regulated. But I think FDA could do a lot more. As I was mentioning in my presentation, when we looked at the consumer education materials that FDA put out last summer, they focused much more on ways in which supplements are not regulated the same as drugs are, and gave very little credence to all of the ways that they are regulated. So I think a big gap there in consumer understanding.
Okay, thank you. This sort of relates to that. So for Dr. Allen, what would you say really are the main challenges the FDA faces in overseeing dietary supplement market? And how are they addressed? So what are your main challenges? I know one is probably limited staffing.
I guess I would have to say, just based on my expertise and arena in the office, I specialize with the GMPs. As I presented the data that 50% of the firms inspected do receive a 483 for CGMP violations. That could be from several different reasons. For one, it could indicate that there's a real problem with people following the CGMPs in the industry. Another cause for that could be that we perform our inspections on a risk-based approach. So it could also indicate that FDA is doing a pretty good job of determining where the risk is and identifying which firms are higher risk. And therefore, that is why we're seeing more 483s with the firms we inspect. That's another possibility.
Thank you.
Okay. This question is about USP surveillance. For the USP surveillance audits, do you look at BOH regulatory actions as well?
Sung J.U.
I'm not very familiar with the BOH regulation. Can anyone explain about BOH regulation?
I'm not familiar with that acronym myself, but perhaps that answer will come in from the questionnaire in the Q&A, and we can get back to it.
Yeah.
So I'll go to the next question. SJ, do your monographs have specified doses with? Excuse me, I've got to open this up a little bit. Do your monographs have specified doses with research established benefits for structure function claims like EFSA and Health Canada?
Yeah, we don't specify as those related information in the monograph. So this is really up to manufacturers. So monograph is more public standard, is not specific to certain ingredient or certain claims.
Okay. Thank you. We have one for Dr. Cooperman on melatonin. Is there any data on degradation in gummies for melatonin?
We've tested gummies with a melatonin. There are issues. I forget our results. There was just a study that came out from Peter Cohn in Boston, who I believe tested melatonin gummies, made a lot of news. And he reported something like over 80% didn't have 100% of what they claimed. Although when you looked at that data, to say that if a product had 101% or 99%, that it is off, isn't really the best way to look at it. We give a little wider look, margin, because there is some, as I mentioned, some overage that is okay because products need to contain 100% of what they claim throughout their shelf life. So I think when we looked at his data again, we found, maybe it was like 30 some odd percent actually we're kind of way off based on kind of the standards that we would apply. I just forget offhand what's in our melatonin review. But in general, we do find more issues with gummies. And part of that relates to what was mentioned earlier, that gummies are, I think it was SJ who mentioned, they're 10 to 12%, liquid. So it's a liquid environment. So things are happening in there. And it's a harder product to manufacture. And we have other concerns about, frankly, melatonin gummies, because, if you're taking this to fall asleep at night, it's really not the best thing you want to be eating before you go to sleep, is something potentially with sugar in it. So I think that's enough.
Thank you. This is sort of along the same lines. In general, when you do your studies on vitamin degradation, do you take into account different shelf lives?
Sure. So we always try to buy products that are at least 6 months out from expiration. We don't test products after expiration. In a few cases, where there's just like a limited supply of a product, we will go down to like 4 months, but never, do we buy products that are after, that have expired.
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the melatonin study because Todd is absolutely right about this. The standards for supplements are different than they are for drugs, for overages and underages. So for a drug, you have to be within a very narrow 90% to 110% therapeutic window of what you have on your label. The FDA requirements for supplements are very different. The regulations say that the product must meet 100% of labeled dose through shelf life. Notice there's no maximum there. It just says must be at 100%. So if your product is going to be, like a melatonin gummy that's sitting on the label for several months, or sitting on the shelf for several months where it can degrade, in order to make sure that you have 100% at the end of 6 months, you must put more than 100% in the day it's manufactured, because you have to allow for that degradation over time. So Dr. Cohen's research, applied this narrow therapeutic window that is not the standard for supplements. And then not surprisingly, he found a lot of products that were 130, 125% of what was allowed. And according to his criteria, they failed his test. But I think we do need to look really at gummies, because they are a much more volatile matrix. And we need to get work from people like USP to help us understand how much is too much. Dr. Cooperman's slide indicated that USP allows for some vitamins up to 250% of label claim, and they will still say that as a passing level because they are allowing for degradation. But when a consumer sees that, the consumer may have a different view as to whether that's the appropriate level if it's not matching what they think they're getting.
Thank you. To this point, is there ever any concern that there might be dangerous levels when trying to make sure you do meet those levels after a 2-year period? Are there any nutrients or potentially botanicals that there might be concern that the overage might be reaching levels that might be too high? This is really for anybody.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I know I'm talking about SJ's work there at the USP, but with the overage on folate, especially from folic synthetic forms like folic acid, too much is not a good thing. And I believe the USP does limit. It does say you can have up to 245%, but not over the limit. For vitamin C, it does not say that, and there is a limit on vitamin C. It's really more toward the diarrhea, but that's like 100 milligrams. But for some reason, there's no limit on that one. So it looks like I think there's more to be done there.
Yeah. So I think there has been a lot of talk about overage and upper limit. Okay, and then we published the stimuli article that specifically addressed that concern. So when it comes to, for example, like folic acid in some certain dosage forms, depending on dosage forms, tablet has a lower overage, soft gel a little bit higher, gummy is much higher because of the nature of product, get lower pH and water content there. But not only have to look at that, overage, but you have to look at that tolerable intake level. Okay, upper tolerable intake level. Okay, so as long as below that level, okay, initial value with the overage, you get under that upper tolerable intake level. We see that as a big concern.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how we approach.
Okay.
And Rochelle.
And it also varies for different nutrients or different ingredients. So something like vitamin B12, you may have a, whatever, 1000% overage, and it isn't the safety concern. And it's such small quantities that oftentimes the overage is quite large because it's hard to measure that out. But for other ingredients, it would call for a lower overage. So it can be ingredient or compound specific as well.
And one thing I think we need to really understand is sometimes, consumer group or, third party, certification organization, they test product. Okay, they need to use manufacturer's test procedure. Okay, you cannot use just AOAC procedure. You cannot use just for USP procedure, because test procedure has to be demonstrated for specificity for that product. Because sometimes you get unusual high number, which means there could be some correlation, interference. Okay, so you have to consider that when you choose the test procedure for testing.
And I would say, I don't completely agree with that. If you think that there's a method that's better than what the manufacturer is using, and it's going to yield more useful information to the consumer, you need to consider that, and that's something we do. We don't always go with what the manufacturer is using to test its product.
Okay, thank you. We go on to another question. This is for Mr. Mister. Are there any data or information for how an MPL would stop adulterated products, fraudulent products, purposely misidentified products, as FDA rarely prosecutes those cases now? Seems, if there's a bridge, if you could bridge this gap in reality, questioner would appreciate it.
Sure. No, it's a great question. If we're going to go to all the trouble to create a registry like this, we want it to have some impact on the industry. As I said in my remarks, even if FDA never enforced it, and I'll come back to that in a minute, because I think that there is incentive why they would. We think that the major retailers are really interested in having ways to curate what they offer to consumers. They know they're exposed. We have seen any number of class actions that pull retailers in, as well as the marketers of the brands. So retailers are looking for ways to make sure that what they offer consumers are safe products. We think that a company that refuses to put its product in the dietary supplement database wouldn't get on shelf, or would not get on the Amazon platform. Those companies who would simply say, we're not going to allow it. So that's the first way it screens out. The second thing is, surprisingly, there are a lot of products out there that are falsely labeled, and they make no qualms about it. So you can look, or excuse me, not falsely labeled, they advertise ingredients that should not be in the products. So for instance, many of these SARMs that we're trying to educate consumers about are on product labels. So that would allow either the retailer or FDA to search that database by the name of that ingredient and identify those products. I think FDA is getting better in terms of identifying where there are the most risk to the product. Dr. Allen referenced that in terms of inspection, how they prioritize who gets inspected. But anything you can do to help FDA, sort of put a target on people's backs who are blatantly and openly violating the law, I think it helps the industry.
I'd like to just chime in because Steve mentioned Amazon. I should mention, I didn't mention in my presentation, so we're always trying to find good products. I talk about a lot of the problems we find, but that's not our goal. We're not actually muck rakers. It's a byproduct of what we do. So if we do a review and we find a problem with the product, we're not going to test that product most likely again. We're going to keep focusing on good products and trying to keep finding the best at the lowest cost, et cetera, for the consumer. But if you go on Amazon, there are so many bad products from so many different manufacturers. And I have to give a shout out to one supplement manufacturer now, who's been doing a really good job, I think, going out and buying products on Amazon specifically and testing them against their own product. I mean, it's somewhat self-serving, but at the same time, they're showing tremendous problems with a lot of the products on Amazon. We wouldn't necessarily pick up these because these aren't necessarily brands that our readers would even consider buying. But there are many, like when I say we find problems with 1 out of 5 products, there are more problems than that out there. It could be, 2 out of 5 if you conclude, could be more if you include all these brands that have found it pretty easy to get onto sites like Amazon and even like Walmart.com as opposed to Walmart stores. It's kind of a bit of a free-for-all, I think, in some of these platforms.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I wanted to get back to the question where we didn't know what BOH meant, and the questioner clarified that it meant boards of health, such as the US FDA. And the question was for the USP surveillance audits, do you look at boards of health regulatory actions as well? I think it's a generic term.
I don't think so, because USP audit is basically, we use audit standard, which is a part 111, part 117, and general chapter 27, 50. Yeah.
You might be referring to state boards. State offices of public health sometimes also inspect and audit facilities.
Yeah, USP audit is a voluntary audit. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a really good question. I think it could be answered by Dr. Cooperman, you and Xiao. All please chime in. It's can you speak to the questions about how to best test a supplement's composition when there are no monographs or quantitative specifications available, and how different standards are verified?
Well, I can start from the company standpoint. There actually are some great resources available. There's a number of methods and monographs that USP has developed that the industry can rely on, AOAC as well. There are actually quite a few. One of the challenges, and I think SJ referred to it, is making sure that the method is fit for its purpose. And that's where the challenge comes in, because there's so many unique formulations and delivery forms and so forth. You really have to do your diligence. If you're invested in quality, you have to do your diligence to make sure that those methods are fit for purpose for your product as it's intended to be used. And that's really where the challenge is. There can be a void with methods for some newer, unique ingredients or extracts, but for the most part, there are actually quite a few resources out there available to industry that have been set by some of these standard setting bodies like USP and AOAC and others.
Yeah, I would say it can be a challenge if there is no validated method. Sometimes we just can't test a product until that happens. That happened, for example, with cranberry. In terms of these A-type PACs, there was no validated method for a long time, even though our readers were demanding that we test cranberry supplements and cranberry juices, and we had to wait until that came out. So that is a limitation often. Sometimes if there isn't that standard, we might look for other things, at least in the interim, like make sure it's not contaminated with something else. So sometimes we'll take that approach.
Yeah. So challenge is, when you have an ingredient, there's a mixture of ingredients, for example, you need to have a safety status. It could be FDA GRAS or self-opening GRAS or NDI. When you put together a GRAS package, you do that kind of test, composition analysis, contaminant analysis, ID test, all together. But if you don't have that, and then you like to commercialize that ingredient, or mixture of ingredients. Okay, well, there's already issue there. Okay, so when we verify a product, for example, no more new materials, we have to go through that stage. Do you have GRAS data? Do you have the report? Is it really expert panel approved it? Okay, and with that, we get to add all the information for the testing, basically.
Thank you. Another question is, each company has to determine safety for its products. Upper tolerable levels, ULs, have not been set for every essential nutrient, and some of the data is extremely limited for humans across all life cycle groups. Some data is several decades too old. When might ODS contribute to and fund more research on ULs? I think that is also an opinion question, so any of you could chime in on what you may opine on that question. And Jaime, I'm sure you'd like to answer that question too. Just kidding. If you don't want to, you don't have to, but it is, it's a valid question.
Well, I mean, I can weigh in here actually based on my previous experience, my past life at CRN. Many years ago, a mentor of mine and a longtime CRN staffer, Dr. Hathcock, helped to develop a model that the industry could use to develop upper levels for ingredients or compounds that did not have them. And as the questioner points out correctly, there are a number that do not have tolerable upper intake levels, even essential nutrients, but certainly is a wider swath of other bioactive substances that are routinely used in products that don't have upper levels. But there is a model that can be followed to develop those. And Dr. Hathcock spent a lot of his career working on that. And that's something that folks can access through CRN. So there is a model there. And there are publications that go into some of applying that model on some substances. There's a lot more that needs to be done, but at least there's a framework that could be followed.
And if I can jump in, since there are upper limits for upper levels, upper limits for a lot of vitamins and minerals, it's important that consumers be aware of what these are. It's not easy to find that information. Again, it's not on labels. We have made that information free on our site. You just go to consumerlab.com/RDAs, and it shows what the RDAs are, what the upper limits are, what the daily values are by age and gender. So that's free on our site.
Thank you. And a related question, since we're talking about upper limits, is what is reasonable overage as indicated by FDA or standards within GMP for dietary ingredients? Anyone can answer that.
I don't think there is an absolute number. There's not an absolute percentage. There's not an absolute value. As Dr. Shao was pointing out earlier, it may depend on the ingredient. If you look even at the essential nutrients, there are some vitamins that are safe up to 10 times the daily value. There are others that have a much narrower window. And so that doesn't even factor in, of course, then, the dosage form. Is it a gummy? Is it a tablet? Things like that. I guess what I would just remind everybody is that the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act does require that if you put a product in the market, it cannot present a significant or unreasonable risk of injury or illness under the suggested labeling that you're providing, or the recommended levels. So, that burden falls onto the manufacturers. If at any point they're putting something out there, and whether it's labeled or whether it's an overage that isn't labeled, if it's presenting an unreasonable risk of injury or illness, it would be considered adulterated under the statute.
Yeah, and I think another thing to keep in mind with these overages is, you buy a melatonin and it has, 1 milligram, but really it has 2 milligrams. and then you think that's what you need, but then you buy another product that has a much more tighter overage by the manufacturer. Yeah, I think it's tough, and especially for like a doctor who's trying to prescribe something, and say, oh, I think you should be supplementing with magnesium, but you need, I want you to take 250 milligrams, but the product might have a lot more or less. So I think more needs to be considered with these overages, especially now what we're seeing with the gummies.
Yeah. So typically, when the manufacturers set the overage, they need to consider that to meet FDA requirement, which is 100% of label claim. So you need to look at that stability, and you need to look at that manufacturing process variability and assay variability. So you have to all put together in the formulation, and then you actually set the overage. That way you can meet 100% of label claim over the shelf life, right? So actually USP published that article about setting the overage, it's like in the stimuli article. So you can check it out through USP NF09.
Thank you.
We only have a minute left, but we do have a final question here, and then maybe we'll email the rest of the questions to everyone and get back to people on the answers. But so while ingredients individually may be backed by clinical trials, companies often combine ingredients without existing data on their combined effects. Any consideration to this in the future in terms of regulatory considerations? I don't think so, right? No.
I mean, it's rampant, and often, the amounts are, sometimes it'll be a proprietary formula, so you don't even know the amounts that they're being, of these ingredients that are being put in there. So, the general, I think, recommendation, certainly from us and some other experts, is to try to buy a supplement if you need it. That's a single ingredient. Then you can start trying it with other ingredients to see, see how that works for you. But I think it can be a little bit of a landmine for a consumer when they really don't know how these things are interacting. The manufacturer may not really know how they're interacting.
Yeah, I guess I would just step in and say that, there's another influence on the industry that we haven't talked at all about, which is the plaintiff's bar and class action litigation. And the industry has certainly been the object of many of these kinds of lawsuits. Companies, I think, certainly CRN member companies, do what's right because it's the right thing to do. But even if that is not your primary motivation, companies are very influenced by the class action litigation. And so that does, I think, influence companies to make sure that the products that they put out are safe. And so they do look at the interactions of the ingredients that they put in there, because they don't want to end up in court having to defend something that's not safe. So I would say the industry does look at these sorts of things. And I go back to the statute requires that the supplement you put in the market cannot produce a significant or unreasonable risk of injury or illness. Nobody wants a product out there that's going to hurt people. So I think the industry does, in fact, do more than you're giving it credit for.
Okay. With that, we're going to close up. Thank you so much to all of you. Really great presentations, great panel. We're just going to show you guys a couple more slides just to close the day. Edwina, are you there?
Edwina Wambogo.
I'm here. Thank you very much. And we have come to the end of the 2023 Practicum. And we at the ODS would really like to thank all the participants for your attendance and participation.
Slide, Mary Frances Picciano Dietary Supplement Research Practicum. May 22 to 24, 2023. A picture of Dr. Picciano. A bullet point list. A link, odspracticum.od.nih.gov. A QR code.
And we really want to thank all the speakers and moderators for a job well done. Thank you all so much. I hope the participants found the presentations informative and will use the information moving forward. The first day of the Practicum provided information on dietary supplement use in the US and the reasons why people use them, and dietary supplement regulation. And in the breakout sessions, we had special presentations on dietary supplement use in the military and the resilience research, as well as nutrition and dietary supplement research funding at the NIH. And day 2 focused on research on dietary supplements and really highlighted some of the issues that we need to be considering when we are conducting research in dietary supplements. The breakout sessions delve deeper into existing tools for collecting dietary supplement use data and the validation of these tools. And we also had presentations on botanical products research and explored resources that are available to support dietary supplements research, including databases. And today, this morning or earlier today, we had special presentations on dietary supplement use and immunity and lessons learned from COVID-19, as well as the place of technology, including AI in clinical trials, including those of dietary supplement products. We have just had right now a great discussion from the FDA and the other stakeholders that have given us different perspectives concerning their roles in the manufacturing, marketing, and regulation of these dietary supplement products. And with this, I want to mention that this entire practicum has been recorded, and the recordings will be made available on the ODS website. Please join our listserv to get the updates, including when the recordings will be posted.
Slide, interested in connecting with ODS? Sign up for our newsletters or follow us on social media. A QR code.
And please feel free to share this information with your colleagues and anyone who might be interested. Concerning the slides for the presentations, you can request them via email at odspracticum@westat.com. And now I will invite Dr. Gahche to say the final words of this year's practicum.
Okay, so I just wanted to mention that in my introduction presentation, that the Office of Dietary Supplements mission is to strengthen the knowledge and understanding of dietary supplements, with one of our main goals to make the most up-to-date scientific knowledge about supplements publicly available. So please use us as a resource, and when you have a chance, if you haven't already, please take a look at our website. There's tons of resources available. For example, again, over 100 fact sheets on dietary supplement ingredients, as well as types of dietary supplements. We have the databases on dietary supplements, like the Dietary Supplement Label Database, which houses label information and labels on over 160,000 products. So you can also check out the different programs we have at ODS and funding opportunities. I do want to mention too, we have videos available from selected ODS seminars, conferences, and workshops that we have hosted. We have our ODS staff publications with links to the actual papers available on our website. Let's see, please, right here, I have this up, okay. Please sign up for our email listserv, again, if you haven't, and you will receive newsletters and other announcements from ODS. You'll also receive an announcement when the practicum recordings are up. Here's the barcode that you can scan, takes you right to the place to sign up. And then finally, I want to thank all the presenters for wonderful presentations, all of our moderators, and of course, James for running our Zoom and keeping things moving and going smoothly. I'd also like to thank our ODS communications team for really promoting the practicum this year. Special thanks also to Westat for helping with the logistics, and of course to our attendees, thank you so much for all your questions. It's really important. Your questions really make the practicum what it is, and we hope that you'll take back the knowledge you gained and apply it to your work or your research. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. Our email is right here. Well, actually, it's not. We'll put it in the chat box. And with this concludes our 2023 Mary Frances Picciano Dietary Supplement Research Practicum. Thank you. Okay, let's put our email.